Hello, everyone. My name is Taylor Landrum. I'm a graduate student in the Clinical Mental Health Counseling program, and today I'm going to be discussing grief and loss related to divorce. When we think of grief, it's most commonly associated with the experience we have after the death of a loved one or someone close to us. But grief resulting from divorce is actually very similar to the grief we feel with bereavement. Grief after separation or divorce is typically viewed as a form of disenfranchised grief, which can lead people to experiencing feelings of shame, failure, loneliness, and isolation. Society typically looks down upon or shies away from discussing divorce, and depending on your religious affiliation, this can be exacerbated because a lot of religious communities uh, exceptionally look down on divorce and may even try to persuade or dissuade the couple from divorcing. And divorce creates loss across all areas of life for an individual. For people who may have not experienced a divorce, they most typically will identify the first one on that list, which is the loss of a partner, the breakup part of it. But there's also the loss of the planned future. So you're planning a future together when you're married and typically planning for the rest of your lives. And so you're losing that planned future that you both shared. You're also losing a significant life role. A lot of people grow up as from children to adults thinking that they will be a husband or a wife one day, and that role can be very important for them, and losing that can be significant. You're also losing a home. You're losing your shared home that you had together with your partner, and you are uh, either one of you is moving out or both are moving out, and the shared home that you had with your spouse is no longer, and you have to create a new one. So there's the loss of that home. There's also potential loss of job, depending on how impactful the divorce is and how able you are to still complete your tasks at work, which can lead to a loss of financial stability if your job is at risk, or if you're also considering that you're going from a two income household down to a one income household. And depending on how much money you made within the household income, you could be losing potentially more than half of your household income by going through a divorce. If there's children involved, there's also going to be a loss of custody. So both parents will go from 100% custody, being able to see their children every day, to at best 50% custody for both parents. And so that is losing 50% of the time that you get to spend with your children after you get divorced. And then there's the loss of family. So you're losing your in-laws, any relationships you made there, and any shared friends that you all had might also be lost as well. So you can see that divorce is not simply just viewed as a breakup, it's a loss of almost all areas of life that are impacted. When we look at the scope of divorce related grief in adults, it's best to start with how frequent it is for us to encounter people who have been through a divorce. In 2023, the US Census reported a divorce rate of 2.4%, which equates to approximately 673,000 divorces filed in 2023, which means there's roughly 4.8% of newly divorced adults per year in the United States. So that's about 1.3 million newly divorced adults per year. Divorce has a profound impact on families, which makes it a very significant concern for counselors. Everyone grieves divorce differently, so when working with these clients, you're not going to get a typical grief reaction from their divorce. Some people may be more elevated and more feel more feelings of freedom when they go through a divorce, particularly if they are leaving a situation that was violent or dangerous. Some people may be handling a divorce in a very constructive way, and their grief is not necessarily impacting all areas of their life. And there's others who are impacted greatly by the grief from a divorce. Divorce increases the risk of prolonged grief, post-traumatic stress, and major depressive disorders. Role centrality, which is how strongly one identifies with a given role, is significantly associated with prolonged grief. And suicide risk significantly increases for individuals for up to 2 years after a divorce or separation. It's also important to focus on the scope of divorce-related grief in children. And children from divorced families are more likely to seek mental health services due to the emotional reactions that they experience. And those can include fear, sadness, anger, guilt, loneliness, rejection, regression, sleeping problems, school problems, physical problems, eating problems, and a desire to reconcile their parents. All of these emotional reactions can lead children to therapy after their divorce of their parents. And a parental divorce during adolescence increases both emotional and behavioral problems. And this effect also is increased even further for an additional 4 years after the divorce. Children are also exposed to the socioeconomic effects of divorce. They may be living in a smaller home if one parent has to move from a single family home to maybe an apartment or into a spare room or even a basement in a family member's home. They may also have to potentially relocate to a neighborhood that has higher rates of crime. And they might have to change schools and attend a school that has a lower academic performance. So there's a lot of different ways that divorce-related grief can impact children as well. When looking at the interventions for divorced adults, the best approaches are cognitive behavioral therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, and eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. The cognitive restructuring techniques in CBT helps to identify and modify the negative thought patterns and behaviors that contribute to the distress after a divorce, which can also help reduce the anxiety and depression that they might be feeling. ACT emphasizes the importance of accepting emotional experiences rather than avoiding them, and it can reduce the psychological distress that they feel after a divorce while increasing their psychological flexibility. EMDR uses bilateral stimulation to recall, process, and resolve unprocessed traumatic memories, and it can bring faster relief for clients compared to other interventions. Interventions for children of divorce are structured play therapy, which helps children identify, express, and accept their feelings related to the divorce. It strengthens their self-esteem and reduces feelings of isolation, and it can help them gain coping skills to manage the changing family structure and dynamic. Narrative therapy can help children externalize and deconstruct the dominant storylines that have been surrounding their divorce of their parents and reframe the child's perspective of it. It maps out the children's stories so they can see their problems within the larger context of external influences and see how those influences might have shaped their perspective. And it can help them create a new relationship with the divorce. When considering the ways to support clients that are grieving a divorce, it's important to be empathetic and curious. Ask a lot of questions. A lot of these clients are feeling isolated, they're feeling lonely, they're feeling disenfranchised, and so asking questions about this can really help alleviate that feeling for them. And typically, if they're not comfortable speaking about the divorce, or if it's something that they're really not wanting to explore, they'll typically vocalize that. So I never assume that somebody that has gone through a divorce is not wanting to talk about it or share their experience, because more often than not, nobody is asking them about that. And so it's important to ask that. And then learning the challenges that are posed during a high conflict divorce is a great way to be able to advocate for your client. Litigation, estrangement, alienation, and reunification are some of the complex issues that can be present in a high conflict divorce. And so these are also topics that are likely not to be covered in a clinical mental health counseling program. So it's important for students to proactively seek out information and educate themselves on these particular uh, challenges that arise in high conflict divorces, because the more that they're able to understand those areas, the better they'll be able to advocate for their clients if they see it arising in their lives. It's important to encourage these individuals to socialize and prevent them from isolating, because divorce increases suicide risk even for people who don't have a history of suicidal ideation. And then lastly, it's important to encourage adults and children to attend therapy immediately after experiencing a divorce. Counselors can help clients identify mourning rituals to honor the loss as they would for a bereavement, which can help them honor the loss and release some of the guilt and shame that comes with the feelings of disenfranchised grief. And children have more success processing grief in constructive play therapy, so it's important to get children into therapy immediately and to start on the path of structured play so they're able to process those emotions and be able to speak to them in therapy. That concludes my presentation on grief and loss related to divorce. And here are my references if you're interested. And I hope you learned something that you can take with you. Thank you.